Today we're welcoming Chett Rubenstein. Welcome, Chett.
Thank you. I work in the technology world for Cisco Systems, one of the top global brands in enterprise technology. And I have a fascinating and challenging position in Cisco in that I am working with the company in general across the board as part of an overall transformation that the company is going through currently. And as part of that transformation, we're redefining what our services portfolio looks like and redefining it in a way that's easier for our customers to understand and easier for our customers to consume. So I have many, many challenges on a day-by-day basis in fulfilling that role at the company.
What were some of the challenges that you had been facing or even currently are facing as a leader that had you knowing that doing deeper work or that bringing yourself into a new context of this kind of work, what were those challenges that you were asking for support with or that you were calling in new levels of awareness as a leader in?
There were numerous. First of all, I chose to engage in this work for a couple of reasons. Number one, I went through a bit of a personal epiphany or awakening or whatever you want to call it last year. Right around the time I went through some surgery that was pending. I actually had some neck injury from years ago that finally needed to get fixed. And so I'm now the bionic man. But as I was going through the trauma of electing to have some of my discs replaced, and as I was recovering from that, I actually had some time to heal and to recover and to spend time on my own. And some information came through to me, and I started to connect the dots around some lifelong patterns that I've been repeating and that haven't been good patterns that have held me back in life. And so that started a conversation around wanting to avail myself of a coach, because I knew that in my life in general, I'm up to big things on the planet. And I knew, especially with this new epiphany and moving forward from that new awakening, that it would be valuable to have a coach. And so that started me on the process of looking for a coach, and that's how I came to meet you. And it's been an interesting journey because when we started this conversation, I was working for Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, who had actually purchased the company that I was with, Cloud Technology Partners. And it was during that whole conversation that I actually got approached by Cisco. And in the ensuing months that we dated each other before I started at Cisco last summer, that's when I was in the conversation with you about this program and how and when it was appropriate for me to get started in this program. And that journey unto itself was fascinating to me because it was an exercise in me maintaining my own integrity, because I knew that I wanted to do this, but I needed to do it under the right circumstances so I could do it powerfully. So the work actually started before I even started the program.
I love that you're speaking to that. I love that. Thank you. Thank you, Chett. Do you have any insight or feedback? We know that sometimes the process of saying yes can come with, for lack of better words, our shit coming up. So there's a really fine line between someone wanting to do this work and life actually showing them, no, it's not quite time, versus someone who knows they're supposed to do it, but life is getting in the way and it's really just a co-creation of excuses to not enter the cave that they fear, right? That the old adage, the cave that you fear to enter holds a treasure you seek, Joseph Campbell. So do you have any advice or feedback or awareness around how someone might know which side of the fence they're on?
So the question is about potential advice for people who are considering entering into the program, and how sometimes when you're embarking on a journey like this, things can come up. And they can come up and look like excuses of why you shouldn't do the work or embark upon it, and fears and all kinds of other things that can bubble up when you make a decision to do something, to do some work like this. So personally, my own personal journey has involved really a few decades now of deep exploration around life and myself and who I am and what drives me, and looking back over the span of my life to see how these patterns have emerged and where they've emerged from. And so it's been quite a journey. And when I started this process, it was actually back in, I remember specifically, it was 1991. And so that would have made me just shy. In 1992, I turned 30. So it was the end of my 20s. And I was in the midst of a bit of transition. I just gotten married. I was just shy of having my first child. I was transitioning into buying a house and all these things I was going through. So I started on this journey. And as part of the work that I did then, which spanned about a decade or so, I started to see how people would do this. They would resist jumping in. For whatever reason, that's not me. I'm very inquisitive and curious. That's been a lifelong trend for me. So I tend to dive into things. And when I was first invited to do the work that I did prior, I was actually by the gentleman that I worked for in Chicago, and he invited me to do this work. And I didn't hesitate for a second. I said, sure, let's do it. But after doing that work for a while and getting deeper into this conversation about ontology and life and how we behave as human beings, at one point I started sharing that work with other people formally. And I got to see firsthand across hundreds of people that conversation about, wow, this is great, but what that looks like. So in spite of that, I learned to just be a stand for people and allow people to be a stand for themselves. And then just be in the presence of that possibility, right? And possibility really is about emptiness. It's about not all the stuff behind you. It's about clearing all that stuff out of the way. And I had the personal experience of literally enrolling over 100 people into this work. So I got a lot of exposure to just being there with people in that conversation of doubt and how all this stuff bubbles up when you're about to commit to something that's really going to make a difference in your life. So the advice that I would give to somebody who's thinking about this program, it is really to, first of all, think about why you're doing it. What's going on in your life that even has brought you to this, right? Because there's some reason why you've been brought to this work. And then once you understand the work, so you're clear about what you're getting into, don't hesitate at all, because there's no reason to hesitate. Life's a fun journey, and at every point along the way, there are things to learn and new ways to get feedback about yourself and the world around you and how you're navigating through this path we call life. So don't hesitate. No reason.
Thank you. As I mentioned before, and as is very obvious, you've done a lot of work already. So what is it that had you knowing that you were ready for more work? And also, what is it that had you able to get over the quintessential spiritual ego? Because you had already done so much work. It could have been easy, right? Now, I know you enough now to know that's just not who you are. But what was different for you that had you knowing that no matter how much work you had done, there could still be more to co-create involving another program?
So for me, that's actually a fairly easy question to answer because first of all, who I am, as I said before, I'm a very curious person. It's part of my just personality makeup. I've been like that since I was a little child. I was very curious about the world around me, and I love to explore it. And the thirst that I have for knowledge in general is unquenchable. And it's been like that forever. So part of it's just me and my natural inquisitiveness around life. But the other thing about me is I've come to realize that I've been blessed with many gifts. And if there's one thing that I learned from my parents, it's not to squander those gifts. And so as part of that, I've been up to big things in life, and as big as possible. And in general, as I've stepped through life, I've taken on bigger and bigger challenges. And now the challenge that I'm facing in my current role with Cisco Systems, which is, a very, very big global entity, and having a voice there that's making a difference globally for a company of that size is the next step for me. And before this opportunity with Cisco came up, I had this bit of an epiphany a year or so ago that it was one of those aha moments where I literally connected the dots with some themes and patterns that all of a sudden I got clarity that, hey, I'm repeating these. And I saw sort of in an instant that what I was doing wasn't serving me. And it was inconsistent with who I was and what I was up to. And those kind of breakthrough aha moments don't come often, but they're transformative. So I could use an analogy. It's like learning how to ride a bike. Somebody teaches you about what you should do and they explain gravity to you, et cetera. But until you push off that first time and learn how to push the pedals to create momentum to move forward and you get balance, once you get that, it's boom, you get it instantaneously and it never goes away. That's why they say you never forget how to ride a bike. And there are certain moments in life where you have those aha moments where your world literally shifts on its axis and you get insight and visibility into something that you didn't have visibility into before. And so when that happened last year, a couple things. Number one, I did realize that I was up to big things in life. And I knew from past experience that when you're up to big things, you get a coach because there's only so much you can see of yourself. I'm looking out my eyeballs. I can't see behind me. I can't really fully see how I show up in the world. I need feedback from the outside. Somebody very wise before told me even Michael Jordan had a coach. That was when I was in Chicago and the Bulls were in the middle of their dynasty, and it made sense. The greatest of the great who are up to big things realize they need outside input. So that started me on the journey of actually very proactively seeking out a coach. And I wasn't exactly sure what kind of coach I wanted. And I spoke to a couple different kind of coaches. I spoke to sort of a psychotherapeutic kind of coaching. I looked at pure business coaching and mentoring, which I did partake in some of. But when I met you and I heard about this program, it resonated for me that really what I wanted was to sort of continue along the path that I'd started a few decades ago. And that path was about really more fundamental understanding of how me as a human being, just like you as a human being and everybody else as human beings, we tend to all follow very similar patterns in the macro sense. And the more you dive into that and explore that, I think the more powerful you can be in your life. And given what I'm up to, that's really what I wanted. And that's what had me, once we met, I knew I wanted to do this program. And at that point, it was really just a function of time and timing, not time, because we all have the same 24 hours a day time. So it wasn't about committing the time. It was about the timing of when to start the program so that I could enter into it in integrity around what I was doing at that time, financially handling things, which was one of the patterns I'd become aware of that I wasn't doing so well. I kept repeating. So that allowed me to actually start the program in a very powerful state of mind because I was proactive and I was doing something what for me was like the right thing I needed to do. So that's what got me into the program.
Thank you. Thank you. What had you choosing this program as opposed to all the other millions of options you had?
To answer that, I'm going to answer it based on where I am on my own personal journey, and maybe this will resonate with people who are thinking about the program themselves. So the deeper I get into exploration of my own self and how I interact with the world around me and the people around me, the more I'm learning that the real breakthroughs come through when you listen to your sort of intuition, when the universe really is telling you stuff all the time, and it's a function of do you listen to it? And so I allowed myself to be open enough as I was talking to different people to potentially become my coach. When I spoke to you, you resonated with me. It was, for whatever reason, my gut intuition said, this is actually where I need to be right now, because this is going to continue the journey that I started a few decades ago. And I knew that this was the approach to this that I needed. I didn't need like surface level business coaching. I wanted to go deeper and I wanted to explore some deeper aspects of what I was doing as far as these patterns and how I'm showing up in this role that I've got with Cisco on a global level. And it's funny, once I honored that and followed my tuition down the path, it's almost like I flipped a switch and the floodgates opened. And I feel like I've just, since I wouldn't even say since I started the program, I'd say since I first met you and started talking about doing the program, I feel like just this channel of information and creative energy has just been flowing through me. It's almost like I don't even have to consciously participate. although I am very consciously engaged, I'm just letting the stuff flow in. And I think I shared this with you a couple of weeks ago. It's almost weird that the stuff that you're talking about in a given week is being presented to me before the session. So the very topic that we're covering, I'm experiencing, and then all of a sudden I go into the session, you say, oh, we're going to talk about this today. I kind of chuckle and say, okay, here we go. And it's been fun.
Such good stuff. Such good stuff. So you're bringing me actually to the perfect segue into the concept of a container. So this work, when people choose it, as you now well know, they're not just choosing a program. They're not just choosing a mentor, coach, guide, whatever you want to call me as the facilitator. They are choosing a container, like this overall energetic container that is working on and with and for them. But that's like not a traditional thing that we're familiar with in our world. So can you describe to those that may be interested in this program? It's like when you're making your monthly payment or your one-time payment, that you're not just buying sessions, you're buying a container, or that you're not just participating in this element of the program, but it's a container. What does that mean to you? And what could it mean to those that are interested in this work?
Part of the challenge is defining certain concepts in language. And there are two words that you used initially, which took me a while to get my head wrapped around, because you actually didn't define them up front. So I had to intuit what you were talking about as we got into it. And then it made sense. Intuitively, it made sense. So the two terms that you use, which I was just not familiar with the context, was container was one, and the collective was the other. So the way I understand them is the collective is really, to me, that's spirit, that's the everything, that's the everything that we're all part of, right? It's the one of which we're a piece of, and as individuals, and we're all part of the one. So that's the collective. You could think of that as the collective consciousness. You could think of it as the God energy. You could think of it as the universe. However you want to define it for yourself, that's the collective. Container is a subset of that, if you will. It's something that we can put a wrapper around and say, okay, we're going to operate within this bucket, within the overall collective. And so I've heard you talk about the program in terms of the actual group of people that are in it with me now. That's a container. Here's part of the special sauce of Jordanna is you are intuitive and you tap into the collective and you listen to what it tells you this group needs right now. And for me, it's been like you've been tapped into my main line and I feel like you're talking directly to me in almost every session. And ironically, session by session, it's been like a continuum. It's one thing is built upon the other. And it's been coming through loud and clear just in my life. And that's why I say it's sometimes the concepts for a given session are actually coming to me before the session because it's just part of the work that we're doing. So that's what's happening within the container. And that's also what's happening via the overall collective. And it's just the collective is deciding what to dump into the container now for us to mull, and it's coming through you as a conduit.
So there are some aspects of the way this work is structured that can sometimes shock people. People, come to me expecting me to be more of a traditional coach or to do more traditional one-on-one work, and I don't. Because I actually didn't get to choose how this work looks, right? I am simply also the vessel and the channel of a body of work that belongs to all of us in our humanity and our uniqueness. I would love to hear from you, though, because I didn't get to decide. I mean, I decided, obviously, I'm human. We have choice. We have desires, too. But ultimately, it was really more of a listening to a greater obvious choice of, oh, this needs to be done in group format. And it needs to be done in a 9-month spiral, etc. Can you speak to how the structure of this program makes sense to you now that you're doing the work?
That's been easy for me. So one example of that is the fact that the work is done online via a teleconference, video conferencing system. It's done in a group setting also, as opposed to one-on-one. And personally, I've learned that's a much more powerful environment for true self-introspection. And here's why. The main reason is that we learn in a group environment that we're sort of all human beings. The flavor of what we're going through may be a little different, but it's pretty much the same kind of stuff that we're all dealing with in our lives. And when you do this kind of work, this sort of deep introspective work in the context of a group of other people, you get more intimately familiar with that, and you understand. It makes you feel more human and more okay, and exploring it in the context of where you hear other people talk a bit about some of the stuff they're dealing with, and you share stuff that you're dealing with, and you see how collectively it's more powerful than if you were just one-on-one. So that aspect of it is great. And so that structure in general, I'm finding works. I like the cadence of weekly because it keeps you present in the conversation. It gives you time to let the sessions sink in, and also to let them sort of manifest the lessons that are coming through. Lets it manifest in your own life. And so by the time I get to the next week, I'm excited to be in the conversation again. Not that I'm actually out of the conversation, because this stuff's just flowing through on a pretty constant basis now. But it's yet to be seen about the overall length, 9 months. I have a feeling at the end of 9 months, I'm going to be anxious to continue this conversation one way or another. So we're going to have to figure out what that looks like. But again, I think in general, being in this conversation is a powerful one. And the way you've got this structured, I think, is surprisingly powerful and appropriate for the kind of work that we're doing.
Thank you. Okay, I have a question I'm actually personally also really excited to hear your response to, because you just have so much wisdom in this department. It's really rooted in the intersection between our humanity and our spirituality, and the physical earthly plane, and everything is energy. But because the whole world is really growing and shifting and waking up more and more every day to everything as energy, there is a focus on the energetics and the feelings and the sensations and the unseen or formlessness of our physical world. One thing that can be confusing for people, though, is that when it comes to wanting scientific proof of things, now I believe and I know that ultimately all of this can be proven. And I, don't believe science and spirituality to be separate things. But for those that are very prone, that might be feeling called to this work, or maybe feeling a resonance, or even just a curiosity about it, but they know that there are very scientific creatures, and they feel like that's holding them back from wanting to do the work, and yet there's still a resonance. What would you say to that kind of a person?
If I understand the question that you're asking me is about what advice that I would give to a person that's very rooted in a sort of scientific view of their world, and understanding their world from that perspective, when in this program we're delving into the intersection of the physical and the spiritual. For me, that's an easy question to answer. But in order to answer it, you have to understand my worldview. And to understand my worldview, I have to give you just a little history. So I was born into a family with a Roman Catholic mother and a conservative Jewish father. And I was actually baptized when I was born, and I was bar mitzvahed when I turned 13. And I was raised in the Bayshore Jewish Center and St. Patrick's Church, which was right across the street from the Bayshore Jewish Center. So I was very comfortable going back and forth between the two. And at a fairly young age, I started to see myself more similarities than differences. Yet I saw in the two different communities, they seemed very focused on the differences. And that raised in me a thirst for more knowledge about what is this? What is religion? And as a young adult, I started to really delve into studying religions. So I really understood the genesis of Christianity. I understood the genesis of Judaism before that. And I saw how one came out of the other. I understood the genesis of Islam, which came out of these. I also went back as far as we could from recorded history, right? You really have to be inquisitive and go back that far to really understand our view. And really, as human beings, if you go back hundreds of thousands of years, if not millions of years, when we really didn't understand a lot about the world around us, we knew that the sun went down every night and we went from light to darkness. We thought that sun was a god and it died every night and then was reborn every morning. It was our way of understanding our world. We knew that we went to sleep each night and it looked like we were dead. So we thought that we slept each night and died and then came back to life again. And then when we actually died, people had to grasp that loss of what that was like. And so out of that yearning to understand these things that we just don't have answers to, a lot of these concepts, these myths, these lores, these ideas started to emerge, right? And today, flash forward to today, and we've come an awful long way from a scientific perspective. And I'm a technology person, so inherently I'm really into science and what's going on. And so if I look at the bleeding edge of scientific thought, we're into the conversation now in a theoretical physics perspective of really trying to create one explanation for everything. So we have at the very grand scale, we have gravity and that concept. And then the very micro scale, we have all kinds of stuff going on in the subatomic realm. And we know this stuff. We just don't have a model yet that fully unifies the two of them. For instance, I know inherently, I feel myself, I'm solid. However, I know scientifically that I'm made up of atoms that are mostly empty space. So in fact, I am mostly empty space. I'm not actually solid. That's an illusion. And I also know that scientific laws tell us that energy never goes away. It just transforms, right? And I've heard a lot of people talk about things like that it's actually energy and information that sort of makes up the bulk of the universe. And I believe pretty firmly that we are energetic beings. I believe that there is an aspect to our beingness or our aliveness that somehow is made up of pure energy and information. And I believe very strongly that it came before our physical bodies were born and exists after our physical bodies die. And so the way that makes sense to me in my scientific mind, I really believe that our universe is comprised of energy that is creative energy. And to me, when the religions of the world talk about God, what they're really doing is they're trying to create a personification of that concept, because a lot of human beings have trouble getting their head wrapped around an esoteric conversation around the energy of the universe and that it's creative energy. But if you look around you, you can see that creative energy manifest everywhere. You can see it in the cycles of the seasons. You can see it in the cycles of the waves breaking on the shore. You can see it in the cycles of planets and galaxies and stars being created and dying on an ongoing cyclical basis. So that energy is clearly there. And to me, when I look at the good book, the Bible says that we were created in the image of God. To me, what that means is that we are actually creative, energetic beings. And that energy of the universe flows through us. And there is a process to creativity. Starts as a thought, which is pure energy. And then if we give that thought enough energy, eventually it will manifest in the real world. And human beings, for the most part, can create anything that they put their minds to, including other human beings, which if you think about that for a second, is a miracle unto itself. And now if I look at science, and we are creating new life forms all the time. We are creating artificial life forms in the forms of software, in the forms of robots. We're creating actual biological life forms, which are new. We actually are creating those with our human brains. So to me, there actually is going to be a reconciliation between what we call the spiritual or the religion or the unknowable right now that we can't explain, and the knowable. There is science behind it. I do firmly believe myself that they are not separate things and that they are not irreconcilable. So that's my worldview. And to me, when we're delving into realms of information and energy flowing through us and thoughts coming through us, that's a perfectly natural conversation to me. It's not strange. And I would invite anybody that thinks in terms of science and fact, et cetera, just understand that science and fact as we know it is evolving. And we keep uncovering more things that we didn't even know that we didn't know about. And it's happening at an accelerating rate, which as a technologist and a scientist myself is exciting. And that's part of the driver for me to do this kind of work too, because it accelerates my own exploration of this sort of realm between what we understand and what we don't understand, and just helps me on this path of my life of understanding it more and having fun with it.
Thank you, Chett.
You're welcome.
Last but not least, let's look at the stuff that everybody wants to know, the results. So what, in the 3 months that you've been up to this work so far, can you describe some of the tangible and intangible results that you've received, both potentially ones that you expected to receive and are happening, and or ones that you totally did not expect, and yet these are also results that are coming from this work?
It was a big leap for me to invest in this program. So it was a big relative investment for me. And I knew intuitively, just like I knew that this was the right program for me once I met you, I knew intuitively that I would get many times over the value of what I invested monetarily into this and what I invested my time in this. And I certainly haven't been disappointed in the first 3 months. If anything, I would say that the results that I'm seeing are coming faster than I thought possible. And I think part of that has to do with just by making the commitment to doing the work starts the process. But also because I've been in this conversation for a long time, for me to jump back into it, I feel like we're almost in graduate school now. And so because I have more clarity and because I'm not resisting things coming in, stuff's coming in pretty much as fast as I can physically process it. And I'm not letting that bother me. I'm just letting it flow. And there's a couple very tangible things that I'm noticing just in the short time I've been on the program. I think that I have a lot more ease in my professional life. One of my lifelong patterns has been a conversation around being not good enough. So no matter what I do, I'm not good enough, right? And so that's a very debilitating pattern to allow to persist in your life. And it's one of those patterns that just keeps coming up over and over again in every interaction you have in your life. It's very easy to go back there. And one of the things I've learned is virtually every human being has that same conversation going on. So I'm not the only one. But especially with what I'm up to professionally right now, it's big and it's global, and it's hard for me to get my head wrapped around, let alone trying to move an organization of the size of Cisco to actually listen to or consider what I'm talking about, right? And come to some collective consensus on how we change the company. And in that kind of an undertaking, it's very easy to go into, oh my God, I'm like overwhelmed. Who am I? Blah, blah, blah. I'm not good enough. But actually, that whole conversation feels like it's like fading into the distance. I'm finding it come up a lot less. And I'm much more in a space of creativity. And when that energy of the universe is flowing through you and you're in a creative space, self-doubt, fear, unhappiness, they can exist in the same place when you're creating. If you're afraid of something, just go create something. I don't care. Cook, work out, make love to your significant other, whatever that creative act is, create, because your fear will go away because they can't exist in the same space. And so I'm seeing tangible results at work. My ability to stay focused, to stay calm in spite of all of the overwhelming things that we're trying to change at a very big company. And it's given me just the patience and the wherewithal to just be in the conversation and just be there with the people and be empathetic with the people around me and let it just unfold. This work is also having tangible results in my personal life. I mentioned before, I'm dealing with an aging parent who's my mom. She's in her sort of final stage of life, and that brings with it all kinds of challenges. And I'm finding increasingly I'm able to be a lot more patient and a lot more empathetic and just be there with her. And I'm grateful for that because I feel at some point in the future, she will be gone and I'll just have the memory of her. But one of the memories I'll have is that I just was able to be with her during this stage of her life and just experience the gratitude that I have for her, who she's been for me. And now I have this opportunity to be there for her. And that's just a very deeply satisfying experience. And being in this program and in this conversation through that has really helped a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot. So those are a couple of things that I'm seeing in the short time of it.
Thank you, Chett. Thank you. So the last question I have, and you've spoken to this a little bit, but let's speak to it directly. You are a very busy person. You are a leader. You are a parent. You are a caretaker for a parent of your own. You are in a relationship. You have all sorts of things that keep you incredibly busy. What would you say to someone who's interested in this work, but it seems like life just doesn't have time or the busyness is controlling their ability to participate?
I love this question. So the question is about if somebody's looking to do the work and their life is very full and they're very busy, like how do you reconcile that and how do you get over that? It's one of those impediments to actually moving ahead and doing anything in life. Actually, there's two major ones, right? Time and money, right? Those are the two big conversations. We never have enough time and we never have enough money. And that is so true in life. But I've learned over the years, we all have the same 24 hours in a day. I've had a bit of a negative conversation around time in my own life for a long time, and I'm still continuing to explore that. And in fact, I'm getting some openings into that. Again, this is a recurring pattern, right? It's one of those things in my life. And so I'm getting some new openings around that just in being in the program. But I can tell you honestly that I'm at a place in my life now where the conversation around time and the lack of time is really starting to dissipate for me. And instead, the conversation is more around, okay, given what I'm up to in life, things I'm trying to accomplish at work, things I'm dealing with in my personal life, making sure that I keep my vessel in good working order, which includes exercise and nutrition and sleep. The more I'm conscious of really what I am up to, the more that becomes a priority for me to literally prioritize all of those things in my life. And there's a lot of them. And I don't want to give any of them up. So I'm in a conversation right now about actually, why am I not prioritizing those things better? It's not that I don't know how to. Why am I not prioritizing those things better? Given that time is one of those two biggies between time and money that we use to prevent us from doing a lot of things in our lives, I invite anybody who's considering the program to really think about that. Think about the impact that just the conversation around time, if you have a breakthrough on that, how much of a positive impact that can have on your life. And so using it as an excuse to not do the program is kind of a joke if you think about it. Don't use it as an excuse. Tackle it and explore what's your conversation around time that's having you even think about not maybe doing the program. Right? I don't have enough time. I got too much to do.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Agreed completely. Thank you.
We all ultimately only have a limited amount of years on this planet. And every minute of that is precious. And the more you engage in a conversation around, hey, what does it mean to be alive and live my life? The more powerful life you live. And I think ultimately the more satisfying life you live. I would encourage anybody that is listening, don't even hesitate. Just get yourself in this program and see how much value you can generate for yourself. I promise you won't be sorry.
I'm so grateful for you, Chett. Thank you for doing this. Thank you.